Welcome back, Heat Seekers. Week 10 is upon us, and do you want the upper hand? Do you want to know which wide receiver needs to be in your lineup? You know we got you covered. Today, we are going to do our wide receiver tiers. As always, you got questions, comments, put them below. If you don't see anyone on this list, probably on a bye week or probably haven't signed with the team yet. And Deshaun, we'll talk about him a little bit going to Vegas, and it'll be interesting. So with that being, who's in our wide receiver 1 overall tier? Is there anything to add about any of these players that people don't already know and have seen? I know Tyreek's been up and down, but otherwise they're all pretty safe plays, right?
Yeah, Tyreek has been up and down, but the Vegas secondary is. So I think that's helpful. Justin Jefferson is playing the Chargers, and they've been better than I think most people think against wide receivers. And same thing with A.J. Brown, going against Lattimore for a large part of the game, probably against New Orleans. I still think they'd certainly have that wide receiver over 1 potential, but those are considerations. But really, if you have any of these guys, you're starting them.
All right, so who's our top 6 wide receivers? Much like the wide receiver 1 overall, these are all guys we would expect to see here. Guys coming back from bye weeks. Terry, Marquise Brown's been on fire for most of the season and looks to be continuing to ascend into wide receiver 1 weekly play categories. What do you think about this list? Is there anyone here you don't think should be in a top 6 potential guy?
No, I think they all do belong there. It is interesting for Stefon Diggs specifically. He's only had really that one blow-up game this season. He only has that one game of, I think it's over, or 19 points or above in PPR. He hasn't had a series of them. He's a safe play. They're going to be throwing a lot. They continue to just not really run the ball there in Buffalo. It just makes you wonder if maybe he belongs a little bit more down in that wide receiver 1 overall upside, just what we've seen. But it feels like also the minute you do that, he's going to have one of those games again to keep him in that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. It's, at this point in the season, anybody who's watched us long enough knows that you start your studs, and these guys are all studs. Who's our wide receiver 1? You had to pick anybody in the wide receiver 1 tier. Who's the guy that, or guys, multiple if you have a couple, that don't do it?
Really, you're probably going to get 1 or 2 at most of the guys from Tampa. It's really rare to see all 3 of them have a wide receiver 1 week. So I think you're probably getting something similar with the guys, Keenan and Mike Williams. Minnesota's secondary is a mess. They all have that potential, but it doesn't seem like regularly you're having multiple guys on the same team have those wide receiver 1 type weeks. Even the same thing with Lockett and Metcalf. Certainly they both have the potential, depending who's at quarterback. Russell Wilson, when he comes back, that certainly would improve their stock. So I think, yes, they all have that opportunity and skill set. Some of these matchups are better than others, but overall, they all are definitely in consideration for wide receiver 1s. Again, guys, you're still starting if they're on your team, if you're in a 10-12 team league.
Absolutely. We're starting to get to them bigger tiers where you're seeing lots of other guys that could boom or bust, but I want to make sure that we preface this. Keep an eye on the injury report. You're going to see guys here in the wide receiver 2 category. Michael Gallup, we're not entirely sure he's going this week. Corey Davis as well. These are guys that are coming off IR, either coming off injury, coming off IR, whatever the case may be. So keep an eye on the injury report. This tier is straightforward, though. These guys are all solid plays. I think Van Jefferson of them, in my mind, is the one that he's probably number 3 on that offense, maybe number 4, depending on how you factor in Higbee. That one could be a tougher one, but otherwise, I think these guys are all very playable assets. What do you think about wide receiver 2s here?
One of the situations that concerns me here, the wide receivers from Denver, you see the top 3 are all sitting there. Status of Noah Fant will come into play, I think, for this too. Albert O, who had replaced him with Fant being out, played well, but then got hurt. Fant, the COVID list, and they kind of seem to think that he'll be back this week. And also, Denver, sounds like lost 3 offensive linemen this past week. 2 of them definitely will be out, and the third sounds like can be missing time. That's never good for your offense when you're missing that. That can have an impact on whether you're having more plays downfield, which Teddy had been doing more of that this year, but it'll limit chances for that. And I think we saw some of that just even with how the game went in Dallas. Yes, they were winning, which going to be throwing less, but I don't think all 3 of them are going to end up as wide receiver 2s. I have a hard time seeing against a Denver. I'm sorry, they're not against the Jets players. Davis and Moore both up as wide receiver 2s. I think that's probably a bit of a stretch as opposed to Sanders and Beasley. They definitely do have that opportunity. You could have maybe one of them go up a tier, that wide receiver 1, when they're facing the Jets. Cole Beasley in particular, with knocks out and then just a lack of a running game. He had 8 catches for 33 yards or something weird this past week. If you're in a PPR league, that's great. If you're in a standard league, not so much. Be aware of the situations going on, not only with the receiving core, the players around them, but the offense in general, what's going on with it. And a guy like Jaylen Waddle here, at the moment feels like the last wide receiver standing in that group, or people catching the ball. Does it possibly give him a chance to bump it up in the PPR type league? Yeah, you certainly could be a wide receiver one. Whole grab bag of different situations that could affect these guys. But the wide receiver tier 2 level, based on what we've seen this year, we have a large sample size so far. It feels right to me for most of these guys. The one that made the biggest move, I think, lately is Hunter Renfrow. He's a safety valve for Derek Carr, and they really worked the middle of the field this past week with him and Darren Waller, and the unfortunate receiver situation there. I do think Hunter belongs up in here for PPR, which again, this is what we're going off as PPR type league.
And this is why I mention it probably in every video we put here on YouTube. Sunday morning, the Boomer Bust Show. Come on, talk to Rick and Bryce and Sully and Matt and the guys and get these questions answered. Do you feel good about, now that everything is set in stone, we know injuries, this, that, and the other, who should I play as my flex, my wide receiver 2, things like that. Get those questions answered as late in the week as possible so you have the best information possible. So flexes, it's not as big a tier as I anticipated. That's a small but safe group of players. Like, I don't feel so nervous about playing Russell Gage. He's been healthy, getting plenty of targets. Zacchaeus is beginning to get more because of the Ridley being out. Like, they're spreading the ball around a little bit more there in Atlanta. The New Orleans guys seem a little more safe nowadays because they're getting a little bit more use and they all seem healthy. Edwards and Hardman are the two that when I look at this list, and maybe even AJ Green, I'm like, if I don't have to, I'm not going to play those fellas. What do you think about this list of flex players?
I think some of it does depend on the quarterback situation. That seems like an obvious thing, but Colt McCoy isn't Kyler Murray. Colt McCoy did show well this past week, and it's another situation where that matchup that they have, maybe it works out that they're able to do that again. By and large, you guys feel like if you're plugging them into a flex play, you feel all right about it.
So moving on to the sleeper tier, obviously Detroit was on a bye week, and everything that I was hearing is the team plans to move Amon-Ra outside as much as he is on the slot because he's been their best receiver, even though he's not produced statistically, he's been their best option. So I would tell you, Amon-Ra as a sleeper is exciting for me because it feels like they're going to target him more and move him to the outside and let him do some things out there as well as in the slot, where Khalif has been getting a bunch of targets, not always been producing very well with those targets. And then outside of him, the sleeper tier, just a lot of maybes, guys that could have a good week or could not play at all. T.Y. hurt. Cedric Wilson with Gallup coming back may not see the field nearly as much. Is there somebody in the sleeper tier that you feel comfortable about?
I think Deandre Carter is one of them that I feel the most comfortable with. He's been getting a nice target share there, and they're going to have to be throwing the ball to keep up with Tampa, I think. It doesn't sound like Curtis Samuel is going to be back. He's a guy that isn't up in this listing here, and I do like Carter more than Humphries. He's been getting more targets and I think playing better than Humphries, although both should see the field. It is hard to pick someone out of here, but Robbie Anderson, as much as I don't want to start him, the guy gets targeted. They do throw the ball there in Carolina, so it's going to be one of those situations where, yeah, if you really need someone, I don't think that he facing that Arizona team where they're probably going to need to throw quite a bit is a bad play, because at least he's getting targets and maybe he'll do something for you. But otherwise, yeah, if you're having to start guys down here, unless you're in a super deep league, you don't really feel that comfortable.
I forgot to roll them, but bye weeks this week. We got Bears, Bengals, Texans, Giants. So that's why you don't see some of those receivers on this list, Brandon Cooks and some of these other guys. So if you ask, that's why. That's it, folks. That's our wide receiver tiers. You got questions, drop below. You got comments, go to our Discord. You can join the community and chat on there. It's free and it's for